CDC guidelines for how to safely reopen are still in the editing phase, according to Dr. Birx of the White House Task Force. That is an excuse for why those guidelines weren't being made the baseline for how to reopen, according to a senior official at the CDC. Okay? Now, let's take on this discrepancy with Dr. Ashish Jha, director of the Harvard Global Health Institute. Always good to have Harvard in the house. Welcome back to Primetime, Doctor. Listen, with all due deference to Dr. Birx, she's welcome on this show. I don't like her side of this controversy. The idea that it's in the editing phase would not prompt a CDC official to say they are ignoring us, because as you probably are aware, people are worried inside the CDC. They think that they are not being taken with the same kind of weight as the economic exigencies. What is your perspective on what matters here?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for having me back on, Chris. A few things. First of all, the Open Up America Again plan that the White House released, as I've said before, was directionally right. It had the right principles. One of the things was I said, it's pretty vague. It doesn't have a lot of details. So guess what? The White House asked the CDC to fill in the details. And the CDC did. And they put together an evidence-based approach. And then it sat around for 3 weeks. And I don't know what it means to be in the editing phase. But what I know is that the American people aren't getting to benefit from the advice of the CDC. And that's a problem.
Well, also, when contextually, again, if the reporting bears out as accurate, is that they didn't like, on the White House side, that the testing and the tracing that was made as a condition, not just for the common sense of restoring confidence in people and creating demand, right, to go out and use these places that are reopening, but that prophylactically you had to have a basis of truth to report to people before rationalizing reopening. And what the White House wants is for testing to come whenever it comes, but reopen first. What is the problem with the latter approach?
Yeah, so no, this is hugely problematic. And, the White House is well aware that testing is very, very important. The president and the vice president are getting tested all the time. If you remember, when the vice president didn't wear his mask.
Every day the president is going to get tested now, and rightly so, because of one case of a valet in his proximity. And they have traced everyone that valet came into contact with. That's what we're asking for. Why can't this country get that kind of protection?
Well, that's my point exactly, is that if that testing is how we protect the president, turns out I want to protect my family too. And it's not some secret sauce that only the president gets to have. It's something that we all should have access to: ongoing testing, tracing, isolation. And here's the problem, Chris. If you wait until after you open up to try to put all that together, case numbers will start climbing, you will fall behind, and your life is going to be much harder as a state or as a country. So that's why many of us have been saying, please do this now before you open, so you can stay open and keep people safe.
Now, the response from the White House is what they would teach you in debate class as RAA reasoning, ridiculo ad absurdum, which is to take an idea and strip it down so much that it becomes a ridiculous idea. To wit, in this situation, testing, John wants to test everybody in the country every day. And that is like crazy, unnecessary, and impractical. And then the president echoed that today. The testing thing, I can go too far, what these guys are asking for. They're saying they don't want to do the testing, so they're going to say that guys like you want to do it to a level that doesn't really even matter.
Yeah, so look, that is obviously not what we have ever said, and I've been pretty aggressive on testing, but even my testing approach, which, we've updated our numbers basically saying we should be doing about 1 million tests a day. That means every American in my approach would get tested once a year. That's not a lot. In fact, we probably should be doing more than that, but that's the bare minimum. But what the president has laid out has every American getting tested once every 4 to 5 years, which is absurd.
Right.
So the bottom line is more testing is better. No one's saying everybody gets tested every day. What we're saying is if you have symptoms, you should be able to get tested. If you're high risk, you should be able to get tested. And that is the level of testing we need if we want to open up safely. The president, by the way, knows this. The White House knows this. I don't know why they're not acting on it, but it's really disconcerting and leaves us all a little less safe.
And look, you do this within the study, but just to be very clear with people, your projection study, it is not one size fits all. Wyoming does not need what Washington, D.C. does, where you have the density, where you have different case considerations, you need a different level of protection. And that makes common sense. Suffolk County, where I live in New York, out on the island, is not as ready to reopen, unfortunately, as other counties in New York State. So we need to have more testing, more tracing, more changes in our caseload than Cuyahoga County has to have in upstate New York. That's not unreasonable.
Yeah, and that's been our entire approach. There are people who said, well, you want to make, just because New York is having a problem doesn't mean the whole country is. The way I think about it is, Wyoming, Montana, Alaska, North Dakota, these are places that probably could open up safely now. They have, probably not quite as much testing as I'd like, but pretty close. They can be pretty reasonably ready to open. Georgia, not even close. So it really is a state-by-state issue. The problem is we need federal guidance on what the science is that's much more consistent that every state can then apply to its own local circumstance.
Now, this is your favorite part of the show. It's the Tell Me Why I'm Wrong segment, which is I see the polls. I get that people, even in places like Georgia, are afraid to go out and start exercising their economic mandate, even if they are given opportunities. And yet I feel, to use a word that means nothing in science, that you guys are losing the argument, that with the seasonal change and the opportunities and the momentum of states reopening, now almost every state doing something, that people are getting sick of this. 56, 57 days is enough. The thing seems like it's not as bad as it was. And I don't really follow the numbers because they're too high. And I want to get back out and live my life. And by the way, a lot of us are getting killed by this economically. So that is starting to overwhelm. But then you have these poll numbers on the other side that suggest that people aren't open. Where's your head on where the country's moving towards right now?
So I'm very sympathetic, Chris, to people who are feeling like it's been a long time. They've been cooped up. There's been huge economic costs of being shut down. I'm very sympathetic to that, particularly painful for hourly wage workers, for people who are poorer. They don't have a big reserve that they can count on. So I'm very sympathetic to how people are feeling. I also look around and people are genuinely scared about going out and getting sick. And so my question is, why are we putting this as the only two set of choices in front of the American people? We basically said, choose your life or choose your economic survival. And I've always argued there's a third path. Build a great testing, tracing, isolation infrastructure. We can let people get back to work. We can keep people safe. It's not some crazy idea that only academics are talking about. Lots of countries have done it. And we can do it. We have every capacity to do it. We just have chosen not to. And that is what frustrates me because we're giving people false choices.
We still haven't used the mightiest muscle of manufacturing in the world, which is ours, to make PPE here at home and to make what you need to have tests here at home.
Yeah.
It is mind-boggling. Dr. Ashish Jha, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, another thing that has people kind of shaking their heads.